the wild world of the diagnostic lab space, nothing is off limits. With science, compliance, sales, and marketing. Welcome to Lab Results with your host, Blake Ford. My people, it has been one amazing week, professionally, personally, inside of my physicality and my body, and then just an amazing connection this week with purpose and focus and being laser focused. And one of the things that really got me going again, and you have lulls. It doesn't matter. Like anybody who tells you, any leader or hype guy or life coach or whatever the hell you want to call them, that tells you that they're always up, it's full of shit. Like there are lulls, man. Like life is like the ocean, man. The waves come, and you get better at predicting the sets, and you get better at riding the waves. But as soon as you think that wave's not coming, that big one's not coming, don't ever turn your back on the ocean. Don't ever turn your back on life. Like we're looking forward, and we're creating the life that we want. We're creating the lab life that we want. We're creating the personal life that we want, and the balance in between there. And so I was inspired by my writing partner, my business partner. I would like to call him my life partner, but he's married and I'm married, and unfortunately we can't do that. Well, maybe we could, Phillip. But
we could, yeah.
But Phillip Suire and I have effectively been working together for more than a decade. We had a business together back in the day. Was a safety business. We were doing biometric monitoring, and we produced what I like to call a textbook called Biology-Based Safety. And you probably hear me talk about that or reference it at least. But Phillip was there through the whole thing, and Phillip has been a literary like touchstone for me. He's been able to listen to the when I talk about collision-based sales, when I talk about leadership, when I'm kind of going through my ideas and verbalizing them. I'm a verbal person. Phillip brings these points from history, and he brings these points from literature, and he brings these very relevant, timeless, perennial, like philosophical laws into the conversation, and it makes me feel better because it's like I'm onto something. I'm onto something. And so, about a year and a half ago, I reached back out to Phillip. I hadn't talked to him in a while. Maybe we were in touch on social media, and I said, "Hey, man, I want to write a book. I want to document the life that I've lived, the good, the bad. I want to be able to talk about going from addict to toxicology lab CEO, from bankrupt to banker, from grieving father to adoptive father, to broke and hungry, to rich and prosperous, to being very unhappy, thinking about ending it all, to like love my life, and just help people kind of smooth out those curves and help folks learn how to ride those waves. And so he came on board, quit his job again, came on board and started helping us, and has been an integral part, almost the cornerstone really of the Core Academy, and it's touched every aspect of it. And so when I say I was inspired, this wasn't the first time that Phillip has inspired me. It's been an inspiration just to work with him and be around him. And this project that we've been doing with Marcus Aurelius, these 10 lessons of Marcus Aurelius, have put me back in the learning mode. The whole thought process about it was we were going to create a piece of content for people who come into our world who believe that they know everything and are not willing to learn anything new and are looking for the quick and easy way out. And we would put something in front of them that would allow them to look at the world through a different lens and really start looking at their life in a different way, and in that way accelerate them. And so going through that process yesterday, was talking about with Phillip when we did the last one. I was like, dude, we need to wrap it. So I kind of took a long introduction to talk about my boy who I love very dearly. But Mr. Phillip Suire, how are you doing this morning?
Doing well. Excited to bookend our fantastic journey through Marcus Aurelius and maybe even get into some other cool stuff too. Our conversations never cease to be a lot of fun.
So the first time I ever met Phillip, this was 2004 or five. I was working at a Coyote Blues, which was a Mexican restaurant where I met my wife. My wife and I were still dating, and I worked for your dad. Your dad was my boss. And who became one of my best friends and a roommate for a long time. He actually walked in my wedding. Your dad actually was an usher in my wedding.
Yeah, that's right.
But you had an Arabic tattoo on your wrist.
Essalam, the peace, peace which passes all understanding.
And so I thought I just thought that was super cool. And then there was a chest tattoo that you had. And for those of you guys who maybe are listening to this audio, there's a lot of ink on my boy.
Quite a bit, yeah.
But when you gave me the explanation of the chest tattoo written, and I'd love for you to I remember it to this day. I still think it's one of the most fascinating freaking tattoos and thought that went into it. But give the audience just a little bit of what goes on inside your head, and it's a good place for people to say, damn. Go ahead.
Sure, yeah. So I was an undergraduate studying English, and I was really into poetry in particular. And there was this American-born poet born in St. Louis, Missouri, who moved to England and lived in England, and essentially, I think he became a British citizen. His name is T.S. Eliot, Thomas Stearns Eliot, really famous modernist poet. And he wrote a very famous poem called The Wasteland. And it's probably one of the most important, among people that spend time studying poetry, probably one of the most important poems of the 20th century. It's in 5 sections. It's several different languages. It's very complex. People literally spend their whole lives studying this one poem. It's a major work, and it's not an easy read. But if you're willing to put in the work, it could be a very rewarding read. And in any event, in the I believe it's the very first section of the poem, there's this little series of lines, not quite a stanza, but a series of lines. And it's a conversation between what appears to be a man and his wife, or a man and a woman who are in love, and the woman says to the man, "You gave me hyacinths flowers. It was hyacinth flowers. You gave me hyacinths first. A year ago, they called me the Hyacinth Girl." And then it switches over to what appears to be the inner monologue of the man, and he says, "Yet, when we came back late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet, I could not speak, and my eyes failed, and I was neither living nor dead, looking into the heart of light, the silence." And then there's this German line, and it's in German, in an otherwise English text. It says, "Ut und leer das Meer." So I'm reading this and I'm absolutely captivated. I'm, 19, 20 years old. I'd actually recently just gone through a breakup with, how it is when you're 20, I mean, you met Jenny pretty young, and you guys dated for,
I was 24 going on 25. She was 19 turning 20. We kissed on her birthday when she was 20.
Really?
Yeah. On her birthday. On her birthday, right before our first kiss, she told me, "I'm going to marry you and have your children."
Hot dog.
And I said, "In that order?"
Right. For sure. Fair question. That's a fair question.
Yeah.
I'm married to an absolutely wonderful woman, as you well know, but it took me a little bit longer to find my bride. And at that time I had been seeing a girl for a while, and we had parted company. And don't let the tattoos fool you. I could be a sensitive kind of guy. I was studying a lot of poetry. So, just the idea of, this man and a woman, and they're in this garden full of hyacinths, and, she gathers up all these hyacinths, but it starts to rain. And so they leave the hyacinth garden, and he's looking at her, and her arms are full of these beautiful hyacinth flowers. and her hair's wet, in her face. And it's this really poignant, beautiful description of this, what seems like a really astonishing kind of, he says, I'm neither living nor dead. It's like time has stopped. And, if you've ever been in love with somebody, you've maybe had that experience where it seems like time just sort of stands. They do this in movies all the time. Everything else freezes and, two lovers are walking toward one another. So it's just a potent sort of moment. But then there's this German line. And I went on later to actually double major in English and German. And my German now is quite good. But at the time, I didn't speak a lick of German. This is actually the reason I decided to learn German. But the edition I was reading had no translation. So I'm thinking, what the fuck does this mean? Like, there's this beautiful description of this really tender, powerful moment, but I have no idea what this means. So I went to a computer at the library at the University of Louisiana, where I was studying, and looked up the translation. And it turns out that T.S. Eliot, the author of the poem, pulled that line from directly from a German opera by Richard Wagner called Tristan and Isolde. And the line means more or less, wasted and empty is the sea.
Mm.
So as he's looking into her eyes, and it flips the script, to use that expression, right? Like, you're looking into someone's eyes, you love her, time has stopped, and yet there's, I don't want to call it pessimism, but there's almost this sort of awareness that, like, no matter how much you love someone, like, you're going to lose them. You know what I mean? It's this sort of, it's more realistic than it is pessimistic. And a lot of Eliot's early poetry in particular is pessimistic, but just the flipping of that script that way. And I was very much feeling that at the time, what it was like to really, really love somebody. Sorry, Beatles and Beatles fans, but love isn't all you need. You need a great deal more than that. You need will, and you need, like, hard work and all those sorts of things. So I was so touched that, one, I went and learned German, and two, I got it Utleer das Meer tattooed. Right, it was one of my early tattoos, and it's one of my favorites still.
So I am, I have two of the cheesiest tattoos. At that time, I only had one. I had an armband tattoo. Like, before they started making fun of people for armband tattoos, like, I was 16 years old whenever I got mine. And I talked the tattoo artist into getting it. It was the first deal I can never say that I actually closed.
Really?
Yeah. I had a fake ID, and I showed up with my real ID on day one. No, I didn't have a fake ID. My friend had a fake ID. So I showed up with my real ID on day one, and I'm 16 years old, and I give it to him, and I'm like, I want to get a tattoo. And he's like, dude, you got to be 18 to sit in that chair. He said, anybody who sits in that chair, when that tattoo gun is on, I need to have an ID to print out, to put in the folder, to basically say that when that gun was on, I had an ID, and the person in the folder's 18. I said, cool. Came back the next day with my friend who had a fake ID that said he was 19. So I show back up, and he's like, hey, man, what's going on? And I handed him an ID. He said, okay, so a couple of things. One, this isn't you. Two, that guy's clearly not 19 years old. Three,
right.
You were 16 yesterday. A year didn't happen. Like, you didn't have a birthday and turn 18. What's going on? And I said, well, you told me that you needed to have an ID, a picture ID. So when you take a copy of that ID right there, you're not going to be able to tell it's fake. And then you're going to put it in the folder. You're going to turn the tattoo gun in, so you're covered. And I got $100 that says you can give me a tattoo. And he was like, sit in the chair.
Nice.
So
the art of the deal.
Not too hard. But I'm listening to you describe think about what I just told you, like how like balls, how bovine that was. How, you know what I mean? Like, how just like freaking, just the inspiration behind that was like, I want thorns, and then you're
the cell's cool though.
Oh yeah, well, I'm gonna have that. I'm gonna have the clothes, but I'm literally listening to you explain yours, and it's like I'm a caveman watching somebody strike fire for the first time. I'm like, holy shit, you can be inspired like that. Like, I had no idea. It was one of the first moments. Like, I never really told you this. I wasn't a fan of going to school, right? I really didn't. Like, I didn't think about being inspired by literature. I always thought that reading put me to sleep. I was told that I had attention deficit disorder. I was told that I was dyslexic. I struggled with writing. I struggled with, my teachers would tell me, like, your ideas are so great, but you write so poorly. We can't understand what you're saying. Like, I would pitch my idea to them about what the essay like meant. And they would be like, that's an A+. But on paper, I literally cannot tell what the fuck you're saying. You know? It was that bad.
I've had students like that.
And so like it made me, I found books on tape after. And when you
Sure,
were living
yeah.
with me, you read all, oh yeah, the other thing. Then Phillip and I started a bromance. When I started my business, he was a safety writer. I called him and said, hey man, I want to hire you. I can't afford to pay you what you're making, but you want to live with me and Jenny? And so he moved up on the second floor.
I did. Yeah. I sure
For 2
did.
years, we worked together while we started a safety company.
And I remember you were really getting it. I don't know if that you were really into books on tape during that time.
That's what I found. I was, yeah, thank you. Like, I found books on tape. If I would have discovered, if Audible would have been around in 1989, I'd have a PhD right now.
Yeah.
I would have known, like, there were tapes, there were books on tape, but if I would have known that I could listen to Shakespeare,
literally books on tape back then, you know what I mean? Like a mail catalog or something.
Dude, I really, I mean, like, for the first, like, say 26 years of my life, I missed out on all of that. I faked my education. I faked learning. I crammed sessions. Nothing really stuck. I didn't start learning until I became a banker. When I was studying for my Series 6 and my Series 7, I had to teach myself how to learn my life, health, and accident insurance license. And they had video, they had tapes, they had audio for the text. So I ordered the audio for the text, and I would listen to it while I was driving. I would listen to it while I was working out. I started making excuses. I found the Game of Thrones. It was right around.
I remember that. Yeah.
Oh, I was obsessed, man.
You tore through those on audiobook, man.
I was making up reasons. I painted the house outside. It didn't need to be painted. I painted the fence. I built shit, like, all so that way I can listen to books on tape. Like,
lots of cooking and listening to Game of Thrones. I'd come in, you'd be making a spaghetti. It's like, some of these Dothraki guys are crazy.
When for me, like, it was a pivotal moment, because it was like an awakening. All right. So when we talk about sales and we talk about, people, like, they can have that spark, where all of a sudden the light turns on, where they're in a dark room, they're asleep. They're not getting a message. And then all of a sudden the lights turn on and they're awake, and they're not really aware yet of what's going on, but it's possible for them to go from awake to aware to then being aware of their surroundings and alert that somebody is outside the door, and open the door before that person knocks. You know what I mean? Like, they can go from alert to active, where they're actually outside of their house looking for a person. And they can go from accelerating, where they're calling like a hotline saying, hey, my child is missing. Like, it depends on where you find the person. You found me completely asleep to literature and woke me up. And I don't know, 1,000 fucking books on tape later, I'm a better person because of it, So, and then like, you spent the last, 6-9 months? No, since before you came on board, we were talking about self-mastery.
Yeah.
And the book, you were like, if you want to learn self-mastery and you want to talk about self-mastery, you need to study Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you started talking about Plato, and you started talking about Socrates, and you started talking about Aristotle, and you started talking about Shakespeare, and you started talking about the tragedy. And it brought me back to, if it's possible for me to have a conversation with one of the best world leaders ever, right? These men who have been celebrated and studied and storied, and who accomplished so much. If it's possible for me to have a conversation with them and learn their thought processes, these men who were emperors, why am I learning the watered down version?
Yes. Yeah.
Why not actually go to the original text?
The source. Yeah, exactly.
And build my foundation for my life, and critically think about these words that they put out there that have stood the test of time. And that's kind of what kicked off this little Marcus Aurelius. It's just a simple little project. It's 2 weeks. We worked every day on it. It's a cool thing to feel like it's the Febreze moment. The room is clean.
It is indeed.
We
Yeah.
made our
Pine-Sol.
bed. You know what I mean? And it's a product now, and it can be out there.
And the great thing too about for Marcus Aurelius in particular, although this is probably true of a lot of literature and philosophy, is one, you're exactly right. You'll often get really watered down versions of source text. It's sort of how it works in academia, unfortunately, is you get like someone who's writing about someone who wrote about someone who wrote about someone who wrote about Marcus Aurelius. So you're like several degrees removed. Stoicism, in particular, of a school of philosophy of which Marcus Aurelius is maybe the chief representative, is really, really misunderstood in the popular mind, for sure. And so kind of the philosophy that underpins Aurelius, which is to say Stoicism, is often misunderstood and misarticulated by second, third, and fourth hand sources. But also, in my opinion, and I think you've experienced this as well, going through the actual source text, meditations, it kind of depends on what translation you get. Some are a little bit more poetic. It was originally written in Greek, actually, even though Aurelius spoke Latin. The language kind of the Romans were still kind of in the shadow of the Greeks in some respects, and the language of intellectuals and a lot of philosophical writing was still done in Greek. So, which is really fascinating. As just a brief aside, you have a man whose native tongue, whose mother tongue is Latin, writing essentially a journal, because he never really intended it for publication, in Greek. And I don't speak Greek, but my understanding is that the original Greek is absolutely beautiful. And when you get a really good translation of Meditations, it's a really, really wonderful read. There's some beautiful poetic moments that really border on poetry. He's such a fantastic writer, and it's a real pleasure to read the source too. And in general, I think it's very accessible. It's not like a lot of philosophy that's very dense, and so much philosophy presupposes that you've read a lot of other philosophy,
Well,
so
I've kind of felt like, and this should just be my misunderstanding of, again, there's this thing that I live by with cognitive bias. Like I don't trust what I learned before I knew how to learn. Like I am constantly forcing myself out of the knowing mode and revisiting ideas and these basic principles through the lens of my life. Like today, like this is the best my operating system has ever been. Like between my ears, this is literally the best I've ever been in the way that I'm thinking and I'm processing information. So why would I lean on what my definition of philosophy was at 22 years old?
Sure. Yeah.
People will go back and they'll reach in their memory banks and they'll be like, oh yeah, philosophy, a lot of it's a mind trap. People, it's just like tough questions,
Sure. Yeah.
and they'll throw something out that they listened to or they heard on like freaking, 90210. And that's their anchor point and their cultural literacy around philosophy. And it's such a caged in existence.
It is.
To be afraid to expand your knowledge on a day-to-day basis. Like I never want to stop learning.
Yeah. And I'd go so far as to say that it's hard to overstate how much a tragedy I think it's been for us. That sounds, like hyperbole, but I mean it really, really sincerely. It's been a really remarkable tragedy for us as a society and a culture and a civilization to lose. I mean, essentially, we enter into the modern world. It's not very long after the Industrial Revolution that most education becomes essentially a function of just training people to be worker bees, right? And our society at large, at least, a few individuals notwithstanding, essentially dispose of the better part of 10,000 years of religion and tradition and philosophy. And then we wonder why the fuck everyone's so depressed. You know what I mean?
Right. We were talking about this yesterday in preparation for this. and it was the first time I had this thought, and I'm going to continue to expand on it, meditate on it, and write on it, because for me it's fascinating, right? I never thought in my life, like, well, a guy like Marcus Aurelius, who 2,000 years ago, or Christ, who lives 2,000 years ago, right? You can name someone else who lived 1,000, 800, 100. These guys had it figured out, right? And wrote this book, and this is life, and this is how this is, consider that this is a way for you to live. Practice kindness.
Yeah,
like sure. This is the way to live. And yet every human being who has ever been born still has to be taught how to eat. They still have to be taught how to walk. They still have to be taught how to read. They have to be taught manners. They have to be taught sex and being appropriate. They need to be taught money matters and finance. And so life is learning, right? Absolutely. And what we've done to education is we've made it a babysitter's club. And I say that because some of my biggest influences of my entire life have been coaches and teachers. I don't want to disparage that. But
me too. Absolutely.
The institution of education and what has happened, it's basically like, if kids don't go to school, people can't work. So we have these long drawn out classes with tons of breaks, and this institution, and tax dollars go to pay it. And you look at it and you're like, the amount of efficiencies inside of that.
Yeah, 100%.
Not only in wasteful spending and money not going to the teachers where it needs to go, but in what we walk away from. When you got poor people who have generational poverty, not only of the wallet, but generational poverty of their soul.
Yeah, that's spiritual. Yeah. And then
year after year, generation after generation, no hope to get out of that place in Mississippi, no hope to get out of that place in New Orleans, no hope to get out of that place in Houston, Texas. Like, they're stuck. Their mama was there, their daddy was there, their grandmama was there. They're not going anywhere. My whole thing is if we can teach someone who is growing up poor like me, you can teach them why they're poor.
Yeah.
Then they can make a decision on not being poor.
Sort of not rich dad, poor dad style. You know what I mean?
Very much so. Very much.
It's great. And I mean, that's great. That's a really good point. Like, it's not just philosophy, which I've taught both high school. I taught high school for 2 years, but I taught at the university level for 6 at a couple different institutions. And really, really bright students came up to me at the university level and they had maybe heard of Plato, but had never gotten a lesson in Plato in their entire life. And it struck me as totally insane that someone could get all the way through high school and even all the way through college and never get a lesson on fucking Plato. Like, are you kidding me? That's so crazy. But I mean, the same could be said for financial literacy too, right? It's not just philosophy. And teachers talk about this. Believe me, it's an issue that in some respects goes well beyond the boots on the ground. These teachers in classrooms who are absolutely well aware that we should be teaching these kids not just Plato, that too, but I mean just like basic. I never got a financial literacy class. I never got Plato. Plato was never assigned to me. I did all of that myself. That's all the way even through grad school, by the way. No one ever assigned me any Plato or Marcus Aurelius ever. That was all me.
So I'd be in an algebra class. I'd be in a geometry class, calculus, science, English literature. And the question I was always asking myself is, how's this going to help me get a job? How's this going to help me make money? Right. Sure. So that was, for me, that was the driver. That was the connection. And, some kids are thinking, how's this going to help me get published as an author? Some kids are thinking, how's this going to help me be a better psychiatrist? Like, my deal was, I'm going to be a businessman. How's this going to help me get more money? And I had an algebra teacher, like, literally give me the lesson of my life when he taught me about a balance sheet and taught me about expenses and revenue and the fundamentals of the banking system. And then went on to limited resources and economics And he was like, if you want to know how to make money, and when I decided to be a banker, this was in the back of my head. If you want to know how to make money, you got to study people who have money.
Yeah, who've made money. Yeah,
if you want to know how to be an addict, go study people who are addicted. If you want to be a good football player, watch tape on people who are great football players. Emulate that success. Stay away from their bad habits. And when I became a banker, I gravitated towards private banking because I wanted to learn from people who had money. And it was like the freaking Matrix, Phillip. I mean, I'm talking about being plugged into some of the most successful people in Lafayette, Louisiana. People who have had failures, people who have had successes. And all it was an opportunity to ask questions, just to learn and not to assume, you know what I mean? Like, I have sales reps that come into the program and they want to finish the sentences of those around them. They want to walk into a room and they want to say, okay, so what's probably going on here is you're doing this and this and this and this. Is that right? The person who's listening to you is going to agree with you because they want you to stop talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
They want you to stop talking. And if you're not self-evident and self-aware, or maybe self-relevant enough to know that you need to shut up. Like, don't show up and throw up. Like, you need to ask questions. Don't assume anything. And it's important for the client to verbalize their problem. People want to talk about themselves. They want to talk about the problem. They want to know that you understand the problem. They want you to connect. And that's one of the things that you and I have been working on inside of our copy and our marketing, is making sure that we have this balance between ethos, pathos, and logos.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And it's fascinating. Again, something that you woke me up to, and being able to have this in rhetoric, and the way that we're, balancing our copy, and we're attracting, for me, it's communicate a message, capture permission, convert mindset, compel to action, close commitment, create confidence in healthcare, collect cash, in any other business. But you came to me with pathos, ethos, and logos.
Yeah.
Give the audience a rundown, and I know you could talk about this for fucking weeks. Give us
yeah, I probably could. I'll try to be concise.
Yeah.
So the Greeks had this idea, and it's articulated really well by Plato in particular, that the human soul itself, or that the human being is a tripartite, a three-part structure. And the Greek words that were given to those three parts were pathos, ethos, and logos. And pathos basically refers to your drives, your emotions, sort of what's like the crocodile brain, the reptile brain, right? Fight or flight, sex drive, hunger, just the sort of the primordial emotional, almost like subconscious, like Freud might call it the id, right? It's like the subconscious, spontaneous kind of responses to stimuli, that kind of thing. That's pathos. And then there's ethos, which is kind of like your psychology. Ethos is the same. It's the root word of our word ethics. So, moral intelligence, ethical thinking and systems. What do you value? What's more, one of your philosophy that you have is like tell the truth at all costs, right? That's an ethics. That would be in the realm of ethos. And that's kind of people's moral intelligence or moral compass, their conscience. And then above that is logos, and logos is a really difficult word to unpack in Greek, because certain versions of like Greek to English dictionaries will have like literally 4 or 5 pages of translations of
not 4 or 5 different definitions. 4 or 5
pages. Yeah, pages. Yeah. Of just the word logos, but it essentially means reason. It's the root word for our word logic, and that's kind of but in some respect it's also in the Greek sense, like you're the divine spark, what connects you like to the divine, but reason, and so Plato had that idea. So that that's every person has all three of those: pathos, ethos, logos. And he described it a couple different ways in a work called the Phaedrus. But the best way I know how to describe it to kind of adapt Plato is like, pathos is like a horse, this powerful, beautiful, but because it's so powerful, potentially a very dangerous animal, right? Horses are really, they're majestic, they're beautiful, they're perfect from a sort of a biological standpoint. But if an out of control or untamed horse can be very, very dangerous to itself, and to certainly to people, right? And that's pathos. That's your passions. That's your drives. Your passions, if they're not subordinated to your will, right? If you're not, this is something you talked about during the series on Marcus Aurelius, right? If you don't control your passions are going to control you. Mm-hmm. So passions, it's not that they're bad. A hunger drive is good. A sex drive is good. Fight or flight. These are necessary to our survival, but they have to be directed and controlled. So that horse is pathos, and then all the equipment you might use to steer a horse, the bridle, the saddle, etc., that's ethos. That's will. So now you have the tools you need to sit comfortably on the horse, to have your balance, to steer the horse with a will. But of course, the will then has to be subordinated to something higher also, because you could, depending upon where you're at psychologically, if you're unhealthy psychologically, you could will yourself for that horse right off of a cliff or into moving traffic, right? So pathos or emotion has to be subordinated to ethos or will, and will has to be subordinated to reason. And the rider is logos. The rider uses reason, uses logic to steer the horse, using the bridle, using ethos to steer the passions in a healthy direction, in a direction that the Greeks, or not the Greeks, the Romans probably would have said that is secundum naturam, which basically means like in accordance with nature. And so Aristotle is a student of Plato, and he's very inspired by this idea of the tripartite structure of the soul. And he writes a book on rhetoric. I think it's called Rhetoric. And he says, knowing what we know about the human soul and its tripartite structure, when we use rhetoric, which for the audience, a really simple definition of rhetoric is just how to communicate a message effectively. That could be using language, it could be using images, visual rhetoric, right? But it's how to use language effectively and persuasively. And he said, Aristotle, based on being a student of Plato and understanding that tripartite structure of the soul, he says, well, if people are composed of those three parts, then that's how we speak to one of or even a combination of those three parts in order to touch them, to inspire them, and thereby to persuade them. And some people, of course, are more rooted in pathos. They're more rooted in the body. Probably, I mean, Plato and Aristotle are pretty clear in their teachings and their works that most people are more emotional than they are rational. They're more rooted in
that's
pathos.
the epitome of facts tell, feelings sell.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which is absolutely true, right?
It's the reason why my wife, Jenny, Jenny, she doesn't want for a lot. I'm addicted to buying purses for her. I absolutely love buying purses. The reason why I love buying purses is because a purse isn't going to make a woman look fat. A purse isn't going to make a woman feel unsexy. A purse isn't going to make her feel a body shame. A purse it's a functional thing. And yes, I like Coaches. I like Vera Wang. I like nice purses. My mom sold clothing. My grandmother sold clothing. I like nice clothes. And so, but when you get into Louis Vuittons and you get into some of the higher levels, and these purses cost $3,500, cost $7,000, cost 25 grand. Logic flies out of the window
Absolutely. Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
Like cars that cost $500,000, that flies out of the window. Like
That's an
there's no,
emotional purchase more than it's
no,
a
it's an
logical
emotional
purchase.
purchase.
Yeah,
It's the way the purse makes me feel. And
absolutely.
then your lights are turned on to it. And now I'm shopping in a grocery store and I see that Louis V logo and I see the brown, which I really don't like. My wife's is blue with the red on the inside, and I freaking love it. And I love that she loves it. And I'm willing to spend $2,800 on a purse and $900 on the wallet that goes with it. Not to brag about the money, but because it makes us feel good. No lie.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Three house payments purse. There you go. How you
Yeah.
feeling, baby? I'm feeling great about my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We eating beans, but I feel so it's important that people understand how strong that is. So
100%.
when you're a lab person and you show up in a doctor's office and you talk about your turnaround time and you talk about your data and you talk about your specificity levels and you talk about it without connecting it to the emotional decision making and the pain
Yes.
problem that is experienced at all levels, micro decision maker, macro decision maker, patient, payer, expanding it inside of their own body and their relationship with their children and the lack of time that they're actually spending with them and what's driving them. Like you have to connect there.
The
And
pain web, right? As I've heard you describe it.
and like that for me, I sell hell. I'm a preacher who sells hell. I am not filling my church with people who want to come to heaven. I am filling my church with people who are afraid of going to hell. I am going to use the regulatory frame. I'm going to use the moral authority frame. I am not going to motivate or manipulate them, but damn it, I am going to make sure that there is a frame, that there's only one decision that you can make. You either got to say, I don't give a shit. I don't care. I only care about making money, Blake. That's the only way you're getting off my list.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what's fascinating, speaking of guys like Marcus Aurelius and Plato and Aristotle, like this is another example of a kind of timeless perennial truth that Aristotle was touching on in his book on rhetoric, 3,000 to 2,500 years ago. That idea that, and of course, there's a place for ethos, which is essentially an ethical appeal or an appeal to credibility, right? And logos is data. If you're and obviously when you're making a sale, whether it's in the lab space or politicians giving speeches, whatever mechanism, whatever situation you're using or you're engaged in to try to persuade or inspire someone to act or to buy or whatever, the most persuasive salespersons, speakers, philosophers, politicians weave in all three because they're speaking to all three elements of that tripartite structure of the soul. But as you mentioned just a moment ago, and I think this was a very wise observation, is if you still, and I taught the same thing when it came to writing persuasive essays, right? Logos is good, data is good, facts are good, credibility, moral authority, that's good, logos, ethos, but you have to take that and you have to tie it back in to pathos, because that's like the foundation of, in some respects, like the human spirit. And that's where most people are at, right? Most people are thinking with their bellies. And or their genitals.
Well, I guess when the average person in the 1400s, 1500s, even the 1900s would go to bed at 5:30, 6:30, like it was dark, nothing else to do, go to sleep, and they were sleeping for 12 to 14 hours until the sun would come up again, and the sun like that. We've completely shifted where our priority now is being entertained. Our priority now is being sedated. Mm-hmm. We are number. It's never been easier to attain a lifestyle that 100 years ago would be considered luxurious. Like the cell phone in our hand, the ability to be able to just Google anything, the want, the need, the desire to go someplace. You can fly across the country in a couple hours. The Oregon Trail used to kill people.
Yeah.
That game, like you get typhoid fever.
Every time.
Little Mary got bit by a snake. Johnny got crushed by a wagon. Like it was hard. And as a salesperson, as a marketing organization, as a healthcare provider, you need to know that it's very important for you to understand that these things about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
That's
are
where self-mastery comes in, right?
right. You are asleep. You are numb. Like once you recognize this stuff inside of yourself, I promise you, it all of a sudden it starts popping up in people around you. You know, like I'm super critical of my leadership skills in small group settings. It's something that I'm actively working on. I'm talking about it with my team members. It's not something that I'm comfortable doing. Like I'm really good one-on-one. I'm good from stage. Give me 10,000 people. God, that'd be a dream. I love it. 5 people in a room all working on something. I get angry. Don't know why. I don't know why. Things piss me off. I have a real hard time focusing and staying on task to the point where like I actively try to say less. And oftentimes I find myself having an out of body experience and I'm saying more. Okay, so I know that about myself. So when we sit around a freaking lunch table and I'm doing an in service at a doctor's office and I'm feeding everybody food and I have a doctor who sits down with me and all of a sudden gets angry or isn't being rational, I got a trigger in my mind saying, oh, this dude's just like me. Oh, I need to take him in one-on-one. I'm not going to get very far with this person in this setting. I need to pivot. I need to change. It needs to become education and entertaining and more of an awareness deal. And I need to lean over and ask them, would you mind if we talked one-on-one about this? I'd really like to get your opinion. And I like to see if there's an opportunity for us to be able to help your patients who are in pain, who may get high bills, who may get the wrong treatment because, you know, this is new technology. I want to get and captivate and gather somebody's attention, and I got to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
This self-mastery and this self-awareness allows us to be able to figure out, you know, what are we made of? And with our family, we realize like my daughter's not me, my wife's not me. We don't think the same way. We don't talk the same way. We're not built the same way. We got completely different emotions. And if I try to cast like my life on Violet, man, what a horrible existence for her.
Yeah.
But for some reason, people practice that parenthood and then they practice that in their businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And they start wanting employees to be something that they're not. They start putting employees in buckets and start looking at their value compared to others instead of asking the employees what they actually want. What are their goals? What are their personal like targets? How much money do they want to make? How much money do they want to save? Do they want to improve their credit score, or are they going on a trip? Do they want their wife to stay at home after a pregnancy? These are things that if you're a lab executive, you know, this HR scare and people not being able to have real conversations. I don't know how you deal with it in your company. I'm like, fuck it. Sorry. If you're coming on board with me, that you know what you're going to get. You're going to get open, honest, raw, relevant, and I'm going to go to the mat for you. And if you're lazy,
all aboard the truth train, man.
Right. If you're lazy, we're going to have a one-on-one conversation. We're going to figure out like, hey, why are you not being productive right now? What is getting in the way? You know, that it unclogs. It lets a small team do a lot of stuff. When people are pretending and posturing, they don't understand the ethic, the ethos.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like how much wasted time and wasted energy is propped up by pretending to be ethical when you're not.
Or just pretending to be a person that you're not, or something. It's exhausting, man. It's exhausting to be inauthentic. It's totally exhausting.
What do you look at like in your you know personal life and what your life's mission is, and you kind of plugging into Core Academy, Phillip? Like what is the thing that you fast forward, put you in the spot now, you fast forward 3 years from now, and 10 years from now, like what's your path look like right now? Do you think that far ahead?
I do. Yeah, I certainly do. Well, I guess I could probably bifurcate that into, I have sort of personal goals and professional goals. One when you convinced me to come onto the Core Academy, most of those early conversations, you'll recall, had to do with I was really fascinated by your interest in self-mastery and your insistence that the Core Academy be that the Core Academy take a much more integrative, holistic approach to teaching and training people, than just like, here's the science, here's the compliance. Like you seemed really passionate and certain that there needed to be this sense of a higher purpose, and that self-mastery was a big part of that, which is another sort of perennial observation and lesson that you get from all the way from Plato to even more modern philosophers like Nietzsche. This sort of idea that, like, before if you can't master yourself, you have no business trying to master anyone else or lead anyone else. You know what I mean? Which speaks, I think, even to a point you made just a moment ago about, if you're not self-aware, it's going to be very, very difficult to make critical, keen, accurate, functional observations about other people. And so, professionally, about me, I think that I genuinely, it's one of the rules. It might have been the first observation that we did with respect to Marcus Aurelius, but it was the idea that we're here on earth to help one another. Mm-hmm. I believe that's a big part of my ethics and my ethos. And so in general, I want to help as many people as possible, mm-hmm. In my life. That includes
how many people?
I don't know whether I've put it as just as many as I can. Just as many as I can. Maybe it would be a good idea to set like a goal. I know like Doug Menifee said it was like 1 million people or something like that. I haven't really quantified it. Maybe I should. I just want to help as many people as possible, both within our organization, and without. I mean, just for example, like to have turned you on to Marcus Aurelius, and to see how passionate you've been about it, and to hear you come and tell me, like, Phillip, I put this into practice working with Violet, or in this business situation, or working with Jenny, like that makes me feel really, really good, because I'm a teacher at heart.
Violet told her cousin last week. He was throwing a tantrum. He's 4 years old, or 3 years old. He's gonna be 4. He's throwing a tantrum, and you told him, Savage, you're never gonna be truly happy if you can't control your emotions.
Right out of Marcus Aurelius. Aurelius would be proud.
He's gonna be 6 in September. I was just sitting there. I was just like, and mom heard, his mom heard it, and I'm pretty sure, like, it takes a minute for you to go around that and cycle that, and yeah. You got to think, is that an insult? Or is that like life advice? Sure. Like where does that come from? And but so when you are you're a master of words, right? You craft, and you live inside of being able to manufacture stories on paper. Sometimes those creative types have a hard time committing to a predicted outcome.
Absolutely. Yeah. To
be able to say, like, hey, listen, I'm going to have a kid, and this is what I'm going to be a father. And in 3 years, I need to make sure my income is X amount. And I'd like to make sure that we're healthy for my, how old are you? 30, yeah. 36, 37?
37. Yeah.
37. So like, I had Violet when I was 37. We adopted her. I had just turned 37, and it came to me realize that when she's 20, I was going to be 57. So I was like, when she graduates from high school, I'm a senior citizen. So I have Bruce, I'm 42. So when he graduates from high school, I'm 60 years old. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, if I don't take care of myself, I will not meet their grandchildren. I won't meet my grandchildren.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So all of a sudden, fatherhood became the ultimate, and it didn't happen while Jenny was pregnant. You know what I mean? And it didn't happen after we lost the girls, especially. You know, it was once we adopted Violet, the moment I came home from the hospital, Phillip, my priority shifted. I went from being a guy who said yes to everything to a dude who could not say yes to anything except for what was on my list. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it was like, and you knew me before, you've known me after, but it was like Jenny became number one, support mama. Violet
Mhm.
became number two. You know, like here's the baby. Being a leader of myself became number three. Being a leader of my business became number four. And the people who were in front of my wife previous to me being a father, the business that was in front of my wife, my business
Mhm.
partners who were in front of my wife, sure shit weren't getting in front of my daughter. I had a priority list. And so now all of a sudden I started saying no to people and started realizing that there were time sucks and there were resource drains and there were inefficiencies. And it was damaging not only my marriage, but my bank account, my pocketbook, my ability to be able to support them. Dude, when I tell you my fucking adulthood started bloop, when I became a father.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in that regard, I, certainly a personal goal that I suppose is intertwined with professional goals is, if I can accomplish anything through the Core Academy, it's I'm totally dedicated. My wife wants to be a stay-at-home mom. The idea of some ladies, find this, like it seems to be for some modern ladies like the very vision of a nightmarish hellscape.
There are some dads that want that too. You
Oh,
know,
sure, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
got some partners that are like, look, man, she's a lawyer. I take care of the kids and drive the boat. And they're like, I said,
Sure, yeah.
pull the boat. I make sure I book our travel, and she makes 500 grand a year being a lawyer, and that's what
And I
she.
make her breakfast. Yeah.
I make her breakfast and I take the kids to school, and it's flip flop. But you know, Jenny's wanted to be a stay at home mom, and
That's
we.
how Elizabeth is too. Yeah. The idea of being like barefoot in the kitchen with 4 kids, like that's her dream. And even more than that, where you've known me for a long time. Yeah, I could hardly imagine myself having said this 10 years ago, but we're our dream is to own like a this 3-5 acres and start a small homestead,
Hmm.
and be as self-sufficient as we can, raise our children close to nature as we can. So that's probably the highest goal that I have. It is to make it possible for my wife to stay at home, have kids, which is her dream job, and that's a fucking job, by the way.
Yeah,
That society in general doesn't consider that. It's maybe the most important job a person could have. Uh,
I get fired from that job daily. You know what I mean? Like it's like I literally like I'll just do it myself. Like Jenny is my when I say my better half, I am better as a person, as a man, as a leader, as just a human being because a Jenny Bork allowed me to marry her. You know what I
100%.
mean?
Yeah.
Like that's
In my case too. Yeah.
and when I realized that the higher she would raise, and I didn't allow her to like I didn't give her permission to be an awesome person. Circumstance and tragedy in our life, if it would have killed her, if not, like the grief of losing the kids and the addiction
Mm.
and just the decisions in that life, like it would have killed her. Like in her soul, like she'd be a different person. I mean, very well we might have both overdosed, taking, but when she starts practicing yoga, when we got clean, she literally became the epitome of health and wellness by her own choice. And I was still struggling with, eating right and wasn't working out and was sedating with alcohol and marijuana. Like it was harder for me. When I came to her with the realization after Violet, I realized I needed a rich dad, but I needed a rich dad who was like I needed a man coach.
Mm.
A lot of
Yeah.
men need to be taught how to be men, and
Most men these days. Yeah.
I didn't go there thinking these guys are going to teach me how to be a father. I'm hiring a coach who's going to actually teach me how to be a better businessman. I thought I was a great businessman. I thought I was a great husband. I thought I was a great father. I thought I was great in bed. I thought I was an awesome athlete. Like I had a high, it was everybody else that had something wrong with them.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like I understand it. My team doesn't get it. They're the ones that have problems.
That's the knowing mode versus the learning mode as you teach it, right?
100%. So like I have the collision of my life at Warrior Week, and I come out of it on the other side. And the only thing, I had this moment where I was on the side of a mountain, and there's like, 12 men all around me, and we've been hiking and like crawling on our ankles and our hands and our knees. And I don't want to cheapen the experience for anybody who decides to do that. It ain't for everybody, but it sure as fuck was for me. And we have this experience on the mountain, and there's just like, I'm the first one to go up, and you just, say the first thing that's on your heart. And I just scream in like California hillside, I just scream, just love her. Like, I didn't think about it before. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to get up here and I'm going to say that. It was like, like say the thing that's on your heart. And that's what came out. And it was like a bear. Like it was, they told me after that, they were like, the pain and the anguish mixed with the joy and the clarity. And I've been different ever since. Like you just have that moment where, like when I held my daughter for the first time, when I had that moment on the side of my mountain, on the mountain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I have never been the same since that point. It's a transformative experience.
Yeah. It's a transfiguring moment, man. A road to Damascus type of conversion, right?
But what they taught me, because I was a wandering generality, my things were like, I want to help everybody. I want to do good. What they forced me to do, Phillip, because I'm a creative type too, is they forced me to do things like put your definition of good down on paper. Be specific with how you're going to help people. Be specific with the number of people that you're actually going to help. Be specific with the amount of money that you're going to want in your savings account. Be specific with what you're going to do with it. Be specific with what you won't do with it. Engineer a date night every single week. Spend time with your daughter. And when you have a son, they each get an hour every week, uninterrupted. Just you and them. Take them on a date. Take your wife on a date every single week. These are things that people fall out of practice of, but it's like, why do we talk about that in a I hired you to teach me sales and marketing, and you're telling me to date my wife. And it's like, well, if you can't seduce your wife, how the fuck are you going to seduce your clients?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you stopped asking for permission and started demanding sex from your wife, or you started demanding the dishes be washed, or you're a tyrant in your house, well, that becomes that thought and attitude becomes a behavior. That behavior becomes a habit when practiced. Mm-hmm. So when you get out into the work world, you're pretending not to be that guy, and your energy is jacked, and you don't know how to deal with people who are telling you no when you're pretending to be somebody who you are not. And so you got to go back to the basis. But it does, man. It comes back to like that 3-year plan. Where the fuck do you want to be? Leaders predict the future.
Yeah.
How many people you want to help?
I want to help 100,000 people.
100,000?
100,000, yeah.
100,000. So how are you going to help them?
I want to help 100,000 people be more self-mastered.
Okay. What's your definition of more self-mastered, Phillip?
I would define that as better capable of controlling their emotions rather than allowing their emotions or their passions to control them. Okay, so we'll come back to that. What's the best way? So we identified 100,000 people. We said more self-mastered. You were clearly a writer. What's a mechanism by which that we can measure that you have impacted 100,000 lives? Write a book and see how many people buy it.
That's a beautiful idea.
Yeah.
How many downloads a book gets?
Yeah. How many downloads or purchases?
So you basically say one of my goals over the next 3 to 10 years, you decide how long is that. we write a book and we get 100,000 downloads.
100,000 people to download it. Yeah.
Right. So, that's a big strategy with a lot of coaches these days. They put a book, they self-publish it, they put it on Amazon, or they make the Audible. A guy like me, I'm going to speak the book.
Sure. Yeah.
Have it. It's going to go to you. You're going to write it. You're going to add in all your beautiful shit. And then we're going to have 100,000 downloads. And then we'll know that 100,000 people said, yeah, this makes sense. I should read this. And then you check the box and say, this career goal that I had, what's the timeline for you to do this?
I think 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we come back, what's today's date? So July 14th,
2022.
July 14th, that would be 2027. We're going to mark something on our calendar right now that says that July 14th, 2027, have you had 100,000 downloads from books? Give yourself permission to write multiple that you have written.
Yeah.
And if we wanted to get structured with it, we'd make a anniversary check on 2023, 2024, 2020, because we would give ourselves the grace to say that maybe we got distracted.
Sure.
We give the grace. We give the grace to maybe there was other things that were going on. Maybe I fell off and then I came back on, right? But that yearly reminder of the person that you are right now that's predicting the future, it's the same thing. It's the same type of setup that you have for your employees. If we really wanted to get structured, we'd say at the end of this year, right, we're going to have 10,000 downloads. Well, that's going to require you to get a book done this year. And then we'd say, okay, at the end of this quarter, we're going to publish our content. So that way I got 9 months to be able to get, 1,100 downloads a month. Can we get 1,100 downloads a month? Can we have 1,100 people subscribe to a YouTube channel that you and I produce? Can we get 1,100 people a month to say, yeah, give me that. I'd like to learn more about the Core Academy and self-mastery. That sounds like a doable fucking thing, bro.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So now we say, okay, what's today? July 14th. So by what's the date we're publishing our book? August 14th, October 14th.
Of this year?
October 14th of this year.
I do have a baby being born in November.
So we got to get this done before the baby's born then.
Maybe so.
We have to get this done before November. What would the process of writing a book look like? Let's take a break from the pressure of having to put a date on ourselves, even though I'm writing down October 14th as my personal timeline.
Fair enough.
All right. But and in particular, because I want to do something. Yeah. I want us to write something together before the baby. Okay. And then I want to write something together after the baby. Because dude, I'm gonna cry when I say the joy that you get from raising your child and how smart you are and the experiences and the way that you can explain that to people, bro, that's gonna be that. I can't fucking wait. I can't wait. Wait. So, but it'd be a really cool experience because you are one of the best writers that I know. I love you like a brother. And I get to choose you as a brother, which is super cool too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You made me cry, son of a bitch. I'm supposed to make you cry. So taking
I'm stoic.
I'm detached from emotions.
Which is not what stoicism is about. But, yeah.
Not what stoicism is.
No, yeah, that's
to learn more about stoicism, read our book.
Coming in October.
Yeah. So what would the process of creating a book actually look like? Like, what is the how there? We got the why. Okay, this is an important piece. We're setting a challenge target right now. That's all we're doing.
Sure.
We're saying what do we want to do? Where are we at right now? I'm a smart motherfucker who likes to write. I'm dealing with this goondick Blake who loves to talk and has got great ideas. Together, we create great content. Let's do it. I want to impact, 10,000 people this year. I'd like to have a book published. Over the next 5 years, 100,000 folks. We're going to measure it by downloads. Like we're just putting the details of our challenge down and putting some waypoints in. Now we get to like the how. Problem, possibility, path, pitch. This is the path.
I think the first step would be to draft a basic skeleton, for lack of a better word. So a good place to start would be what would the chapters of the book look like, and then you begin to draft each chapter in terms of a very basic outline. So if the first chapter is about A, then what's the main idea of A? What are the supporting arguments or texts or sources or materials that help to unpack A, and then working on the organization. And a big part of writing is organization and rhythm, and it almost always starts with especially when you're producing something kind of lengthy, even a short book. You'll teach students to do this even with 5-paragraph essays, is to outline first. And when it comes to a longer form text like a book, that usually begins by outlining chapters and then going through the chapters and outlining the individual chapters. That's usually a good starting point.
So of the I have to ask you this, and I do have my own opinions about it, but I'm not going to share them now. I just want to focus on what you want to write. Of the stuff that we have done together and lived together at core, and of the kind of the story here and ways to be able to connect with people, call it your vision, my vulnerability. What part of the story you want to focus on?
I think something that you and I both share in common is our appreciation, and we've talked about it a little bit on this podcast, the appreciation of moments that totally transfigure a person spiritually and change them, hopefully for the better. I think we both agree that we've had moments that have transfigured us and changed us for the better. And so I think that maybe the basic premise of the book would be a kind of collection of different moments, of different transfiguring moments, of different conversional moments that led to greater awareness of self, greater awareness of others, greater awareness of our crafts, whether that's sales, marketing, writing, being a better husband, being a better father, being a better person, sort of
So the title is less important than the actual subject matter, but we have spent a lot of time on these real pivotal moments where it's like the art of the reframe, right? It's like reframing addiction as a superpower is something that has always been the professional addict, being able to reframe my addiction as my superpower, where I always thought something was wrong with me. Now I realize that, golly, man, good, God bless the rest of you. Because whenever I get going, you ain't stopping me. Like that's the mindset. Now, if that not stopping is cocaine, that's a
sure.
If that not stopping is oxycodone, that's a bad thing. If it's porn, that's a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
But if that not stopping is living for a purpose and studying and connecting with people and solving problems and working hard and being diligent and keeping your calendar and dating your wife and spending time with your family and making sure the RV is there so that way they can visit you whenever you're building these labs, like that's a beautiful addiction.
Yeah.
Reframe. So in my mind, that's kind of what I said I wasn't going to share. But that's kind of where I want to go with the first book.
I think that's exactly in line with what I was trying to articulate. This idea, because you transfigure the addiction, right? You take that energy, and to use a Freudian term, you sublimate it, you ventilate it forward, and you turn it into something productive rather than destructive. But that requires a kind of psycho-spiritual conversion or transfiguration. Yeah. So I think that the book would have to do with, in some respects, maybe techniques for opening yourself up to that transfiguration, but also a recollection of moments, of personal moments that have been had and even shared, that have facilitated those transfiguring experiences, and allowed you to be, you know, a better version of yourself, and me to be a better version of myself, whether that's with respect to our crafts or across those the four domains that you often talk about, right? Body, being, balance, and business, with these transfiguring, conversional, almost psycho-spiritual moments of enlightenment that allow us to be better in those ways. And in some respects, it would be, I almost and we think about these things, and then when you begin to draft an outline, they kind of unfold organically, often in ways that we don't quite expect. But I feel like it would almost be part, you know, confession, sort of confessional, almost like Marcus Aurelius, like meditation. It's like this kind of almost like this journaling of experiences, but that are articulated in a way that's meant to impart a lesson. But that's the second dynamic, I think, would be like strategies. The idea is to tell these stories not just to entertain, although many of the stories would be very entertaining, but to use that as a mechanism or as a venue to inform people, and to provide techniques and strategies for allowing others to do the same thing in those domains of their lives.
You know, you really start to think about mortality whenever you get over 40. Some guys have a hard time with this, like midlife crisis or midlife collision that they go through. And you know, what I care about is that I get to tell Violet and Bruce and their grandchildren the story of my life and Jenny's life, you know, separate and then together, in my own words.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But
yeah, absolutely.
From the dude that I like, the guy that I am right now. And then I think that there's an opportunity constantly to add to, and it's a touchy subject. When we get into addiction, there's all kind of stories that are going to pop in your head. And you're going to be like, well, you're not qualified to talk about it because you're not an addiction counselor. Or you're going to, then there's going to be a story that's going to say, well, you're not a qualified life coach. And even though I have 2 certified training, you know, certificates for it. And then there's going to be a story of like, who the fuck are you? It's imposter syndrome that starts popping up.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you're creating, as soon as you almost have to get into a meditative state and speak as though you're I don't want to say someone else, but you can't judge what you're doing. You can't edit while you create, is what I'm trying to say.
Those are 2 different processes.
You literally have I've got to basically get into, I got a closet that I basically have where it's the sound quality is super good and the camera's just right here. And I'm going to speak fire into the camera, and I'm going to get the story out the way that I know how to get the story out verbally. And we're going to get it transcribed. I'm going to kick it over to you. You're going to get it. We're going to edit it, and we're going to start gluing this bitch together. And by October, through the normal course of our life, we have 13 weeks. We do a podcast every day.
Right.
I mean, we're creating content every day. And I also know, like, if James listens to this podcast, he's going to be like, it's not a rock. I get it. And it's not. But it's something that we're doing every day. It can absolutely become course content. It can absolutely be, you know, a part of the marketing plan for people to know, like, and trust us. The more important thing about your challenge, like what we just did, and setting a challenge target and getting meaningful and specific about the reason why and where we're going to go and how to measure it. How will you know you're successful whenever you get there? Setting the waypoints and saying, this is how we're going to start. You and I'll go offline and we'll plan out the next 13 weeks as far as making sure that we're checking in about it. And then the content gets done. The content can get edited. We can get it self-published. Like, all that shit can happen. The most important part is the declaration.
Sure. Yeah.
Telling it to others, putting massive leverage on yourself and declaring, this is what I'm going to do. And the reason why is because most conscientious people will do the shit that they say they're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So are we writing a book over the next 13 weeks?
It sounds that way.
Sounds that way. So you just got to say, I'm going to write a book.
we're going to write a book over the next 13 weeks.
Yeah. So October 14th, title to be determined, content to be determined. And I think this would be super cool also to be able I spent about $130,000 on a marketing guy that did very little for me, except he left me with this really one statement: capture the contemplation. People don't care about you when you're perfect or once it's perfect. Everybody gets bit by the perfection bug.
Yeah.
Nobody gives a shit about that once you figured it out. What really people care about is the behind the scene moments on how you built it, how you created it. What was it? What was it like? What did you struggle with? What were those decisions like? And letting people actually peek behind the creative process. Phillip, that would be super cool if we ran this like double entendre where our podcast kind of focused on those areas. And let's say we're talking about the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and we're writing the meditations of Coach Blake's life. And we're really talking about that once a week. We're coming on and we're talking about the stories and the life lessons, and we're wrapping it back to body, being, balance, and business. And we're wrapping it back to lab sales and the lab life and connecting with patients and doctors. We can kind of have a more of a three-dimensional creative process that would allow it to be able to be in our normal workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds very practical. And what you were just, I really like that. I don't know if you've told me that before, the idea, capture the contemplation, but really what that sounds like in terms of narrative theory would be like the hero's journey.
Right.
Like, it's like nobody, like the story ends with happily ever after, like then everything was great. Like, that's not a very exciting read. It's like the state of dynamic tension that exists within the hero and without the hero as he or she overcomes all of these obstacles in order to reach that point. It's interesting. So if that's what I hear when I hear capture the contemplation, and it makes a lot of sense from the standpoint of just basic narrative theory and what and how stories, whether they're fictional or non-fictional, touch people and resonate with people.
When you write a book, is it guaranteed that when the book is published, it ends up in the Library of Congress?
No, I don't think so.
How do you get a book in the Library of Congress?
That's a good question. I think there are mechanisms to submit it for approval, probably by some committee. But of course, there are occasions where the author is long gone, and then they just
big audacious, big hairy ass goal.
That's a big hairy ass goal for sure.
Yeah, right. And honestly, I don't know. Maybe it's as simple as like you fill out the application and it's done. But that would be cool. And I'd imagine it has to have some literary merit, and maybe it's a number of downloads, maybe it's a copies sold, maybe it's a impact on folks. But when you think about podcast rankings and being able to get something, we put zero juice behind this podcast. We've literally just been creating the foundational content and more like organizing our own stuff, and it has been in a way captured the contemplation.
Absolutely.
We start putting Aspen and start, getting on other people's podcasts and coming back. We've got something like 30 episodes now that folks are going to listen to. And for the most part, it's good. It's entertaining shit. We get people who like it and tell me about it all the time. But to get into the Library of Congress, that's something that seems like it'd be a lot better. So we're going to put that as a side note, Phillip. It's not going to hold us up.
Let's not let it hold us up, but let's not discount it either.
That's right, brother.
Certainly 100,000 downloads would be a good argument in favor of including us in the Library of Congress.
Right. And you figure 100,000, like in these cost plus shipping type of models where you get into somebody's funnel and they have a book and they're like, hey, my book is free, pay for shipping. And what ends up happening is the book is an advertisement for the program, and you start reading it and they have really good stuff in it, but then you're on their mailing list. You have to give their email address to get the book. That's the exchange of value. Now you have this email sequence that comes out and you can see it. They're telling you everything about the program. Then the offers start coming. They tickle your interest one day at the right time. You opt in to have a phone call. They close you. You're paying money to be in somebody's program. that's the function of getting business and framing yourself as an expert. And so if our goal is to improve the lives of 100,000 people, then this is a good way for us to be able to impact them and infect their mind. We say greatness is contagious around here. Mm-hmm. Infect their minds with the idea that they can master their self.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, speaking of things kind of integrating within our natural workflow, I think as we develop the training material that we're in the process of developing now, a lot of that is going to be really great content for the book too, because it's intended to be instructive, right?
Big time. I'm going to give you the final closing words, my friend.
Read Marcus Aurelius. Go out, get a copy of Meditations. It's well worth the read. It's a great introduction into philosophy. Smash like and subscribe. Let's listen to more of Lab Results with Blake. And when we produce our book in a couple of months, download it so I could make my wife stay home.
I love you, man.
Love you, brother.
You've been listening to Lab Results with Blake. This is Blake Bork. Please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Remember, greatness is contagious.